Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my booktube channel. Quit it. Today I'll be talking about different myths about publishing books. So as you've probably noticed, I'm in a car. Right now my brother is driving. So why am I filming this in a car? Because obviously the audio is not great, and that's because we're headed back to Texas. We're going a bit early because my brother's teaching a debate camp and our parents both wanted us to leave at the same time. So we still have 2 weeks until school starts, but Texas is where we're going to do college. So that's why we're driving. And why am I doing this in the car? Well, I should have done it earlier. I intended to do it maybe the day before yesterday, but things just got busy just because the last few days my family really wanted to spend time with me. And then last night I was up till about 11 packing. As you can see, we're pretty full. And the trunk is absolutely packed. It's like there's no more room, and I feel a bit bad because I took up all of the trunk space with my boxes, and then I also took up one of the back seats, and then David just has the other 2 back seats to work with. I actually even still left some boxes, so he's obviously much more of a minimalist than I am. But as you guys know, I have a book that's releasing September 17th. Again, pre-order link is down below if you want to check that out. Although if possible, and if there's a way for me to personally give you the book, that's preferable. And this actually leads us to our first myth about publishing. And it's not really a myth, but it's something I wasn't aware of. So if possible, try and buy a book from me directly rather than on Amazon, because if you buy it from me, I can sell it to you for $10 as opposed to $16.99 on Amazon. And that's because if I sell it to you personally, I don't have to worry about inventory, like keeping it in a warehouse or any type of fulfillment. And of course, that means that there's not a retailer who's taking a percentage of the profit. And so retailers and distributors actually take a lot of the profit. Retailers like Amazon take about 60% of the profit, and then after that distributors take 22%, and that leaves you with a few dollars, so not a lot. Whereas if I sell it to you directly, I only have to pay for the production cost, which is $5.82 a book. And this is important because profit margin is important. It's insane that I could sell it for a much lower price at $10 and actually make more profit off of it. So that just goes to show you, if you want to support authors, try and buy from them directly or maybe through their website as much as possible. The next myth is that all publishing is equal, and if you're an author, that means you have a book out there. And when someone tells me that they're an author or that they have published books, that means a lot. There are some authors that I really respect and hold in high esteem, and there are some authors that essentially just slap something onto Amazon and they have their family and friends buy it. So as far as being published goes, there's a lot of degrees of quality, and sometimes this is the difference between indie and traditional. Obviously, traditional publishing can have more barriers to entry because you need things like a literary agent, and more on that in a bit, because literary agents nor publishers accept unsolicited manuscripts, which makes it really difficult to try and get a literary agent and then a publisher. And anyone can self-publish or indie publish or independent publish, whatever you want to call it. But with that said, there are some really high-quality indie books out there. It really just depends on the author and how much money and time they put into developing the quality of the book, whether they pay for editing, get a cover designer to do it, or just do the cover themselves. Some indie authors can do the cover themselves and it looks really good, but it's a very specialized skill, just like writing is. Which brings me to my next myth, and that's that anyone can write a book. So technically anyone can write a book, but you have to learn how to write a book before you write it, or else no one's going to really buy it, and you can't expect to have a long-term career based off of that book. For a lot of people, it's on their bucket list to just write a book and have it out there, which is fun and all, but if that's the case, you can't really expect it to sell a lot, because writing, of course, is a very specialized task, just like cover design or being a brain surgeon. If you want someone to do the job right, they have to have education and experience. And no one's going to say hey, I just want to do a brain surgery just for fun sometime. I mean, with that said, the consequences of doing a bad brain surgery versus a bad book are very, very different. But sometimes I think people forget how specialized a skill writing is, especially writing fiction. So sometimes there's this concept that anyone can just write a book and have it up there, and then once it's for sale, anyone can buy it and you can make a career off of it. which is true. Anyone can, but you just have to put the time and the effort and pay for books to learn how to do it, pay for editing, and of course going to writers' conferences. Now I'd like to talk a bit about a point I touched on earlier, and that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. So a lot of people think that you can just send your manuscript out today and that eventually someone will pick it up. Sure, you might get tons of rejections like all those famous authors did, like J.K. Rowling, but eventually you'll get accepted and it'll work out. And that's possible, but agents and publishers alike don't really accept unsolicited manuscripts anymore. And unsolicited essentially means manuscripts that they didn't ask for. If a publisher or agent doesn't know of your manuscript and they don't know to ask for it, then how do you present it to them? Well, first of all, to get a publisher, you need a literary agent to represent you. To get a literary agent, they often only take on clients who, A, are recommended by previous clients, so if you know another author who has a really good literary agent, or B, you meet them at a writer's conference. Now, writer's conferences are pretty expensive and can be $1,000 or $2,000 per trip if you factor in flights and then attendance and food, and of course the hotel. But oftentimes it's one of the only ways to get a literary agent nowadays, unless you know an author who has a really good literary agent. And with literary agents, don't sell yourself short and just go with the first one who will pick you up. Literary agents, in my experience, vary drastically in quality, so get one who could really maximize your book and sell it to its fullest potential. Same goes for publisher. Like, going back to that myth about like if you're an author, you're an author, and like one published book is as good as another published book. There's a really big difference between getting traditionally published by a big publisher, like one of the big five, and then getting published by a small publisher. Essentially, if you have a manuscript out there, even if you're a new writer, you can probably find... Sorry, my brother's passing someone right here, so it's kind of bumpy. But even if you're a beginning writer, you can find some small publisher who will represent you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should go with him, because yeah, they'll get it published, but they might do a crappy job and just take all your rights and give you a small percent of the profit. The great thing about a big publisher is, yeah, they do take a lot of the rights you have for the book, and you only get a small percentage of the profit, but they have teams that work on editing and marketing, a little on marketing, more on that later, because I have a lot to say about that too. And then the cover design, and you don't have to pay any of those upfront costs. So the quality in the editing and cover design and things like that will vary drastically from a big publisher to a small publisher. Actually, that's why a lot of people go indie, is they figure that they could do a better job than a small publisher would do. Of course, the consequence is that you have to pay all the upfront costs if you're going indie, but you do get to keep a larger percentage of the profit. So a lot of times you can do better on your own than with a small publisher, so just keep that in mind if you're looking at that route. And then next we have the marketing aspect I was talking about. So a lot of people think that publishing a book for an author is something like this pie chart. It's mostly writing the book, actually pretty much all writing the book, and the publisher takes care of everything else. Well, this often isn't the case anymore where marketing is concerned. Now publishers expect authors to come in with big online platforms that they could sell their book to, because they want a guarantee of good sales. And even after the book is published, they expect the author to do a lot of marketing on their own, and sure, they might stick your book in a catalog, but that might be the extent of what they do. And of course, this varies from publisher to publisher. Just from what I've heard, a lot of publishers don't do so much of the marketing anymore, and the author's expected to do a lot of the marketing on their own. And because authors have so many more responsibilities than they used to, even if they're traditionally published, that's why a lot of authors have veered toward indie publishing, since they're like, hey, I'm doing a lot on my own, I might as well pay the upfront costs and then keep the profit myself. So that's a myth about the publishing process people have, is that authors primarily write, and that's most of the publishing for them, but actually they have to do about half marketing and half writing now, which is pretty insane. And a myth about the writing process is that a lot of the work is the first draft, and then you have some inspiration because you have a really amazing idea, and then you have some editing. Well, it's actually more like a crap ton of editing and then a little bit of inspiration, because honestly, story ideas are a dime a dozen. If you ask anyone, everyone has a story idea. There just aren't many people out there who are willing to take the time and dedication to write it. And then you do have the first draft, which is a sizable chunk. Right now I'm going through the first draft in my second book in the series after Captive and Crowned, and it's really painful. but I'm going to have to rewrite it at least once, maybe twice, and most of the process with writing is actually editing. So from now on, I really shouldn't say like, hey, I wrote a book. I should say I edited a book, just because that's what I spend most of my time doing. And we have 2 more myths left to go. So this upcoming myth is the lone writer myth. Essentially that you can stay in a cabin in the mountains and write a book by yourself, send it off to someone, and you can get published and do really well. And that's just not really the case anymore. Honestly, if you look at the acknowledgments in the back of any book, you'll find a team of people behind the book, not just the author. So writing isn't really a solo process, although people often think of writers as introverts, like huddled alone at their desk. And that may be true, but while they're at their desk, they may be on their computer communicating with their editors and other author friends who are giving them critiques, and they might be sending out ebook copies to ARC readers who will give them reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. Especially with marketing, it's just a process that takes a whole team of people. Both people you hire and people who help you with your book just because they're either A, your friends, or B, they adore your writing. So writing is very much a group process rather than just one person writing a book. And then the last myth kind of relates to something we talked about earlier, but it's that writing is a long-term career. You can't just publish one book and expect it to do really well. Sure, we have some outliers like that, but by and large, most authors that do really well are doing well because they've written for a long time, and then they have lots of books out there. And it needs to be a long-term process because a lot of times on the first book, you'll lose a profit, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. And I think this is partially because you're inexperienced as an author. It's your first book. And sure, again, some debuts do really well, New York Times bestsellers, but a lot of debuts aren't necessarily the author's best book. So again, for the first book, the author doesn't have a lot of experience. And then secondly, they're still building their online platform. And they're going to have a much bigger online platform further down the road than they do when they publish their first book. This is just something I've heard from my writing coach, but when publishers take on an author, they want it to be a long-term relationship with the author, because on the first book they expect to lose profit, the second book they expect to break even, and on the third book they expect to actually gain a profit. So it takes a few years to actually make some real money on books. So writing is just a long-term process, and oftentimes you can't expect a debut to hit off and be a New York Times bestseller, although that'd be pretty awesome. Well, there you guys have several myths about publishing and writing. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe, because I try to post one bookish video a week, either about writing or reading. I was supposed to post one last Saturday, but again, I was just packing for this trip and getting ready to go back to college, and I didn't quite manage it. Hopefully once I get back into college and I have more of a routine and a schedule, I'll be a lot more consistent. I know I've talked about that a lot for the past few videos, because I haven't been as consistent as I should, but I am working on it. So if you enjoyed those videos, please just subscribe so you can keep up with the videos I'm posting when I do post them. The goal is to post them Saturday at around 7 p.m. Central Time. And in the comments, I'd love to hear from you guys. Tell me which one of these myths surprised you the most. Or tell me another publishing myth that maybe I didn't include in this video. Let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!